Morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker. I'm here for another constitutional talk. You know, we've got a lot of founders that were really important in setting up this republic, getting our Constitution through, getting our Declaration of Independence passed. And John Adams was no minor player. He did serve as our second president, had Jefferson as his vice president. He was born on October 10th, 1735, and he died July 4th, 1826. In fact, he died on exactly the same day that Jefferson died. And his final words were something along the lines of Jefferson lives. They had both Adams and Jefferson had served in the Continental Congress. In fact, that's where they met, and so their careers kind of paralleled each other to a certain extent. He wrote some political essays under the name of Humphrey Plowhopper, and they were important essays in the paper, talking about liberty and that kind of thing. He married Abigail Adams, which was his a cousin of his, and they set about raising their family over again. He authored the Braintree Instruction, which argues the Stamp Act should be approved because it denies fundamental principles of liberty. He defended John Hancock in court for violations of the Acts of Trade. If you remember, John Hancock ran the House of Hancock, and it was an importing exporting firm. And he even had his ship Liberty seized, which we earlier were discussing. He also defended the soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre and largely got them off their charges. He served in the Massachusetts legislature, and then he went on to the Continental Congress, which I mentioned. And in the Continental Congress, especially in the Second Continental Congress, he he was instrumental in getting the Declaration of Independence. He was put on the Committee of Five, which worked on the Declaration, with the likes of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. And so he was instrumental in the Declaration of Independence. Once it got out of committee, he made an important speech to Congress convincing them that it was now was the right time, and that we had to go for independence, and that we should approve the Declaration, which is exactly what happened. So the Declaration of Independence was approved, and it went on. And like I said, Jefferson and Adams' careers kind of were in sync with each other for a lot of the time. Adams went over and worked on getting the peace agreement signed and the Treaty of 1783, which we just discussed recently. And so he was there getting that approved. Jefferson also was sent there, but he declined because he was serving as governor of Virginia at the time. And after the Treaty of Paris of 1783, he did serve as a diplomat for a time, which is why Jefferson was not here for the Constitutional Convention. Washington was our first president. John Adams was the second president, and Jefferson was his VP. And John Adams, his biggest accomplishment was keeping us out of war, even when our ships were seized. One of the things that's discussed a lot when you're talking about Adams is the Alien and Sedition Acts that were passed, that he could deport aliens if he felt that they were causing trouble. And the Sedition Act went against the uh, freedom of speech. And remember, this is after the Bill of Rights is approved. So it's Jefferson in particular felt that he had violated the Constitution protections. But prior to Marbury versus Madison Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court had no judicial review. So the question was what to do with it. And Madison and Jefferson wrote up the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, and they tried to basically nullify the law. And it was sent to other states, and they just simply didn't approve it. This is what destroyed the Federalist Party. So in the very next election, Jefferson is elected, and he allowed the one act to expire, and he repealed the others to get rid of the alien sedition laws. One of the things it did was it made it so you couldn't become a citizen for 14 years rather than the 5 that it previously was. There was a great strain on the relationship between Adams and Jefferson. And following the death of one of Adams' children, Jefferson wrote to Abigail Adams. And what I got here today, this is the Adam Jefferson letters. And I thought that I'd read a section here because Jefferson was opposed to the alien sedition laws. But when you get into this letter, I think his words better explain what was going on. Now, this is written long after he had been president. Okay, this is from June 14th of 1813. It says, "Dear Sir, in your letter to Dr. Priestley of March 21, 1801, you tender him the protection of those laws which were made for the wise and good, like him, and disclaim the legitimacy of the libel on legislation, which under the form of a law was for sometimes placed among them. This law, I presume, was the alien law, as it was called. As your name is ascribed to that law, as vice president and mine as president, I know not why you are not as responsible for it as I am. Neither of us were concerned in the formation of it. We were then at war with France. French spies then swarmed in our cities and in the country. Some of them were intolerable, turbulent, impudent, and seditious. To check these was the design of this law. Was there ever a government which had not authority to defend itself against spies in its own bosom? Spies of an enemy at war? This law was never executed by me in an instance. But what is the conduct of our government now? Aliens are ordered to report their names and obtain certificates once a month. And an industrious Scotchman at the moment, industrial laboring in my garden, is obliged to walk once a month to Boston, 8 miles at least, to renew his certificate from the marshal. And a fat organist is ordered into the country, etc., etc., etc. All this is right. Every government has by the law of nations a right to make prisoners of war of every subject, of every enemy. But a war with England differs not from a war with France. The law of nations is the same in both." I read this because I want you to understand in his own words why the Alien and Sedition Acts. And the Alien and Sedition Acts did destroy the Federalist Party. They got weaker and weaker as time went on, and there was this big hubbub that they were against immigration, which they were not. And I think that's really important to understand what we're referring to here. And when Jefferson took this as a campaign issue and hammered Adams with it over and over again, it becomes apparent why this was such an important issue. Adams was a very good president, and keeping us out of war was vital. But also getting us independence and arguing before the Continental Congress to push for independence was not a small thing. Two of the delegates actually left the room so the states could vote and be 100% united at the time. The Declaration, they felt, was signing their own death warrants, as England would surely come against them. Remember, we're talking about July of 1776 here. It was signed on July 4th, but the final vote was the 2nd. And, in a couple of months, we'll be getting closer to our 4th of July celebration, and we'll surely talk about that. I hope you get a better idea of the Alien Sedition Act here and why Adams felt it was important, and how John Adams was important to the passage of the Declaration, and as working on the committee for the Declaration, he was every bit as involved as Jefferson and Franklin and Livingston and the others on the Committee of Five. Well, we'll catch you next time on the next Constitutional Talk. You folks have a good day. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.